Hi, I'm Kelsey with Just Sew, and today I'm going to teach you how to use triangles on a roll to create perfect, quick, easy half square triangles. This is one of my favorite methods, second only to cake mixes. I do already have a video on cake mixes if you're more interested in that. Cake mixes is basically the same technique, but it's meant to be used with layer cakes or 10-inch squares. What's great about triangles on a roll is you can use this with yardage straight off the bolt, and usually it'll tell you what size to cut your strips of yardage into, and then you will use this paper accordingly. So I'm going to get into that. All that you need to be aware of to start this tutorial is that triangles on a roll come in different sizes. So this one makes 2.5-inch unfinished, 2-inch finished half square triangles, and you can get them in all kinds of sizes in half-inch increments. So I believe it starts at 1-inch half square triangles and it goes up from there. So you can kind of, depending on the size that you need, get the paper according to that. You can also see on the packaging how many half square triangles one roll can make. So take note of that according to whatever pattern you are working with, how many rolls you might need. One roll makes quite a few hundred half square triangles. It all depends on the size, but they all make hundreds of half square triangles, so often you might only need one. So in this case, the pattern I'm working with is actually a pattern I'm writing. It's not finished yet, but I'm working on the sample, and I know that I only need one roll of 2.5-inch half square triangle, 2.5-inch unfinished half square triangles for this. That's another thing to keep an eye out for when you're looking for the correct size is are you looking for 2-inch unfinished or 2-inch finished? And what I mean by that is the size before it is sewn. So when you have just cut it and it's in its raw with all the raw edges like this is a 2.5-inch square. But by the time it's sewn on all the sides and the seam allowances are accounted for, it'll be a 2-inch finished half square triangle. So make sure that you look at whatever pattern you're using and see what size it calls for and if it's unfinished or finished before you buy your triangles on a roll. But these are pretty affordable. It's just like $12 for a roll, and for like any size I think they're all the same price. And so I'm going to go ahead and show you guys start to finish how to use one of these. It's very simple and very repetitive, so I'll just show you a little bit of each step just to get you started. Okay, so first off, you're going to need your rolls, of course, whichever roll you chose. And then you're going to need two different fabrics. And so you're going to need your background fabric and your printed color fabric. So this is my background fabric and this is my printed fabric. Now with the size of triangles on a roll I'm working with, which is the 2-inch finish size, it tells me to cut my strips at 6.5 inches long. So I got my yardage and I cut it all down into 6.5-inch strips. And so now what I'm going to do is put my strips right sides together. So I have my light print on here. Your background may or may not have a print to it, depending on if you're using a solid or not, but you will want them right sides together. And then here's my green fabric, and I'm going to lay it just right on top of that. Okay, and my selvages are over here, and I do want to keep track of my selvages to make sure I don't go over them. But now all I'm going to do is lay out my roll like this and grab my pins. And I'm just going to start pinning. And one thing to pay attention to is make sure that your strip, because you're going to be going, what I'm doing is going the whole width of the 44 inches of the width of fabric. And so as you go, you may or may not get the paper kind of crooked. So I like to lay it out for about a foot or so and make sure that it's straight, because if it's straight right here, it'll probably stay straight the whole time. And then I don't put a ton of pins in here, but I do just try to put enough in where I know it won't move at all. So at the beginning, I like to pin in the middle here. So you're going to be sewing on the dotted line. So you want to pin away from the dotted line so that your pins can stay in as you sew. So at the beginning, I like to pin in this like middle diamond section and at the two corner points. just so that I'm off to a good start and I don't get any of these, and the fabric doesn't like fold underneath or anything like that. And then as I move along, I smooth it, make sure that my paper is smooth and my fabric underneath is smooth. And then from here on, I will pin in these sections, but I usually don't pin in both of them. I just kind of pick one and then I alternate. So I'm going to go up here, and then I'm going to pin in the middle, and then I'm going to keep smoothing it out and pin down here. And if you want to put more pins in and pin in every one of these little inset triangles, then you can, but I don't feel the need to, so that's kind of personal preference. As you go, you'll keep unrolling your paper and smoothing out your fabric. Make sure it's not totally necessary that these edges line up perfectly, because you will be cutting them off at this solid line right here, but because your strips are the same size, they should line up perfectly. So mine do, so just kind of make sure they don't get too far off. Okay, when you get to the other end, you'll want to pay attention to where the selvage is and where the closest straight solid line is. And so my selvage and my closest line is right here, and so that's where I'm going to cut it off. So I don't have to cut it off in the middle of these triangles and waste any paper. I'm going to cut it off right on this line. So because I know that's my last one, I'm going to pin in both of these just to keep it nice and secure at the end here. And I'm also going to pin in here somewhere that I know will not be where I'm cutting. And then I'm going to cut on this line. Now you can either use paper scissors to just cut the paper off right here and allow your selvage to stay for a little bit, or you can use your rotary cutter to cut the whole thing off. I'm just going to do that for now. And my paper is hanging off the edge of the table, which is why I'm trying to hold on to it. Okay, so I'll pull my paper away. And this is now ready to be sewn. So we're gonna go ahead and take this over to the sewing machine. Okay, before we start sewing, here's a couple of settings to be aware of. Over here where your stitch length is, you're gonna wanna shorten that. I shortened mine to 1.4. This is harder to rip out if ever there was a need to rip it out, but what you're trying to do is perforate the paper with your stitches so that it's easier to tear out without pulling stitches out. And so you want your stitch length to be a little shorter for that reason. Another thing that my machine can do, but I don't know, it depends on the machine that you have, is I have a pivot function. So I'll show you guys the benefit of that, and I'll show you with and without the pivot function what you're going to do. But I always turn mine on when I'm sewing with this. It's just so helpful and convenient. I just have a regular presser foot on, and my needle is in the center position. That's the easiest place for it to be as you're following this dotted line. So what you're going to do is you have arrows here showing you the direction to sew in. So I'm just going to start at the corner here at one of my downward arrows and start sewing. You're going to sew down, and then I have a pivot here, and I sew down over here until the edge. And when I get to the edge, all I'm going to do is sew down to my next line so I don't have to cut my thread and restart it over here. Those stitches in this blank space will be cut off, so it's just a faster way of getting there. And I'll show you what I mean. So we'll go ahead and get this all set up. I'll first show you without my pivot function on, since most of you probably don't have a pivot function, what you'll need to do, and then I'll show you the benefit of having that feature. As I sew, I'm continuing to make sure that the paper and the fabric underneath is flat. The pins can make it a little wavy, but it should still be in a smooth place if you pinned it correctly. But I just like to kind of, you know, make sure I'm not sewing any creases into my fabric or paper as I go. And it is a little bulky here on the side, so you can roll it up or whatever you want to do. I kind of just like push it aside over here. Then you want to stop when you get right to this point where the two dotted lines intersect, and you'll have to pick up your presser foot while your needle is down, and then lower it again once you're back on track and sew the next line. Okay, when I get to this place where there's no dotted line immediately touching where I'm going next, and I have to sew down this, what I like to do here is just pivot it so that it's straight, going straight down. This is on the outside of the black line, so these stitches I'm about to sew will get cut off, but that's what I want. I just sew down until I'm at my next dotted line, and I pivot, and then I start again. Now, let's see how it looks with the pivot function. I'm going to go ahead and turn that on, and you'll see what happens. I'm approaching my point where I'm ready to pivot. And my presser foot is automatically lifted up so that I can pivot this and keep sewing. Same thing here. So I just think that having this feature on a machine saves a lot of time, but it's obviously not necessary. You can also manually lift up your presser foot in between each step. I'm going to go ahead and finish this line, and then I'll show you guys how to start the next line, and then you'll be able to sew the rest of your lines from there without me. Then I'll just cut my threads. Okay, and then starting from the same side that we just finished, I'm going to find the next downward one. So there's two sets of downward arrows that I could go. So this is the one that I just finished. I could either go here or here. What I like to do is do the one on the opposite side. So instead of doing the same one, which is just going to follow the same side that we just did, I like to do this other one, and then along the way I can take my pins out, because then all of the sides will be secure. And then you'll just complete it by finishing these other two rows of stitches. So this kind of creates your, this is one half square triangle, this is another, this is another, this is another. So per strip right here, you'll get 4 half square triangles. So I'm just going to go ahead and start sewing down this line, and then I'll complete all 4 of my rows, and then we'll come back and cut them apart together. Okay, so once you have this whole thing sewn, you would have 4 different rows of stitching that you did. And now it's time to cut on all the solid lines. You can really do this however you want, however makes sense to you. You can cut on every solid line. You can cut the whole length this way. You can cut the diagonals first, really whatever you want. I'll just show you how I usually do it. I usually do a set of 3, so 1, 2, and then 3, and I'll cut on this line just to break it up a little bit. Set this aside. Okay, and then I like to cut on these 2 side lines, which has all of my extra fabric on the edges, that like allowance that they gave me with that 6.5 inch strip. So I just cut on this line, and you can see this will also cut off, if you can see this, the straight stitching that you did to get in between the rows over here. So that'll cut that off. Okay, now I'm just going to cut on this long line in the middle, and then I'm just gonna rotate it and cut these two at the same time. Make sure it's all lined up. If you do this on a rotating cutting mat, it might be a little bit easier. Okay, now I'm ready to cut on my diagonal, and you can do this one at a time. I like to do it 2 at a time. I just line up the black diagonal line on my ruler, cut them apart, and then I make a whole pile of the triangles that are ready for me to rip, so that I can do that as like kind of a hand project while I'm watching a movie or something like that, because that part will take a little while. Okay, so once you have your triangles cut apart with the paper, it's time to rip them off. Okay, to rip off my paper, what I do is I put my fingers in the middle here, I grab just the paper side, and I create kind of a tension between my thumbs to rip this way. And if you rip slowly, you'll probably get that whole strip off in one go, and then this part will just kind of fall off. But when I do it quickly, sometimes I'm left with a little bit at the end here that I have to kind of just pick off a little bit. But really, it's super easy, and you could even like leave those little bits on if you want, if it doesn't bother you. But you'll just kind of sit there and work on ripping all of these off. See here, I have a little piece that was left at the bottom, but it's pretty easy to just pull off there. This is where you'll notice that your smaller stitch length really came in handy, because it perforated these lines for you and made them ready for ripping. See, this one was really bad, so I do have to take these off. There we go. And you'll just keep going like that. And then the last step is pressing. So I'm gonna bring my little pressing station over here. So all I like to do really is I kind of do all of one step at a time. So typically what I'll do is do all my sewing, and then all my cutting, and then all my ripping, and then I'll have a huge stack of these ready to be pressed. And so all I do is I open it up, and I'm going to press it towards the dark side, so the not background side. And I just do a lot at the same time by opening them up and kind of putting them on a pile like this, and only pressing each one for a couple seconds, because it's kind of pressing the ones underneath it as we go. Like this. And this just kind of, I feel like, makes this process super quick, and you're just pressing. One thing to note when you're pressing half square triangles, make sure that you're putting a little bit of tension on this so it fully opens it up. Otherwise you might accidentally iron a crease in it, so it's not actually pressed into the seam. You might accidentally press it with like an empty crease right here, and you don't want that. So what I make sure I do is I will open it up, and I will put my iron on the background side, and then I'll pull to give a little bit of tension over here to my darker side. And then as I pull, I'll push the iron over. You don't want to pull a lot because you don't want to stretch the fabric. You just want to make sure that it's fully open. And here is my finished half square triangles. Just to give you guys an idea, this is what I'm working on right now. I kind of did each step at a time per fabric. So I did all my sewing on the blues, and then I did all my cutting, and then I did all my ripping, and now they're all pressed. And now I'm in the middle of doing all of my ripping for my pink fabric. And then like you guys just saw, I'm in the middle of sewing all of my green fabric. So that's where we kind of are with the project I'm currently doing, but this is how big my ripping pile is. This will be nice for movie night tonight. Okay guys, I hope that was helpful to you as you learn how to use triangles on a roll. I feel like it's mostly self-explanatory. The instructions come printed on the roll and things like that, but it is always helpful to kind of have a visual confirmation that you're doing it right when you're following some written instructions. So I hope this was helpful. Make sure you check out the rest of our tutorials and subscribe to our channel. We come out with new tutorials all the time, at least every other week, if not every week, and we hope that you enjoy them. We'll see you next time. Bye.